Week 4 preview show coming at you here in the Lawrence County SportsNet, powered by LCAP. Week 4, Game 5, we preview here on the Lawrence County SportsNet podcast series. It's delivered, as always, by Penn Ohio bottled water delivery services, whether it's the 3 or 5 gallon jugs or your standard cases of bottles delivered right to your home or business. Let Penn Ohio do the heavy lifting and bring refreshing water straight to your door. And with that, let's get right into it with our feature game of the week. The Laurel Spartans hosting the Union Scotties. It's our only Lawrence County versus Lawrence County battle for Week 4, Game 5. Two teams that actually met twice last season, and both were, to call them instant classics would probably be a little bit of an understatement. Union ended up winning the penultimate game. Laurel won the first one in regular season at Union in overtime. Union getting the playoff redemption 30-28 in that playoff game in the route to their long run into the district championship and the state playoffs. This year, though, teams are really moving in opposite directions. Union 3-1. They're coming off a big 40-8 victory in the Big 7 opener against Shenango. Laurel, however, has lost 3 straight. They've lost 14 seniors from last year's team, so no surprise it was going to be a bit of some growing pains throughout the course of the year. They're coming off a non-conference loss last week to Berlin Brothers Valley. But go back 2 weeks ago for the Laurel Spartans, because it was a how can I say this? They held their own for the first half against a very strong Mohawk team, and actually it was that young offensive line of Laurel that really controlled the game, controlled the line of scrimmage. It was actually a late turnover in the end of the first half, really changed the flow of that game. Laurel looked like they might have been leading going into the half. Instead of the turnover, they ended up trailing 7-6, and Mohawk was able to take control in the second half. And really, that's what Laurel's going to need to do here in this game against Union, is to really control that line of scrimmage. They have a big but young offensive line. They're going to have to get more of those 16-play drives like they did against Mohawk, help keep that dynamic Union offense off of the field. Lucas Santini throwing the ball pretty well. Jackson Sauter's a good changeup, really doing a good job. Kind of more like a wildcat quarterback, but he's shown off his arm as well. They're a good little combination to have behind center. We'll see if Laurel is able to get the ball, though, into the hands of Ben Hennon, give him a chance to shoulder the load on the ground, and really shorten this game, I think, is the key for Laurel. You need to shorten it when you're facing Braylon Thomas and company. But Braylon Thomas with 6 total touchdowns last week, including a couple of touchdown strikes to Grayson Blakely, and fellow receiver Dane Jonke also now, by the way, has scored a touchdown in all 4 games this year. 7 o'clock kickoff for homecoming there at Spartan Stadium. It's also homecoming in Bessemer, the other game where we will be on Friday night. Mohawk hosting winless New Brighton. What more can you say about the Mohawk Warriors than Jay Rona right now, leading the WPIAL with 17 passing touchdowns through the first 4 games. And oh, by the way, he just qualified for the WPIAL Golf Championships next week as well. And he's really spread the wealth on the football field to his receivers. His cousin Bobby Fadden has been the main recipient, 5 touchdowns for him. But between Fadden, Dante Retort, Blake Logan, good luck finding a trio of receivers that has done more so far for their offense across the district. Oh, and how about the emergence of Justin Boston as a runner and a pass-catching back? Just another dimension to this Warrior attack. New Brighton, I mentioned 0-4. They've really struggled offensively, but they did have the ability to show that they can hit the home run ball. They've done it a few different times on the year. Michael Vian catching a long touchdown pass from Brian Taylor, early in the Rochester game 2 weeks ago. And the Lions, they held tough for 3 quarters before the floodgates opened up late against Laurel. That's also a 7 o'clock kickoff. Lee and Jay Moan on the call for that one in Bessemer. Tim Continenza and myself on the call there between Laurel and Union. Hopefully you're on call. If you're not at one of the games on Friday, you'll be tuning in to one of those, and we'll have score updates coming along for the other 5 games going on Friday night. We'll talk about those when we return. It's the Week 4 preview show presented and delivered by Penn Ohio Bottled Water.
Don't get left out to dry. Call the Penn Ohio Bottled Water Company for the fastest and most efficient bottled water delivery service in the area. Penn Ohio offers bottled water ranging from 16.9-ounce bottles to 5-gallon jugs, perfect for your next event or office water cooler system. Also, don't forget to ask about their custom labeling options. Visit PennOhioBottledWater.com for more information and to get a quote on their delivery services. Whether it's at home, in the office, or on the sidelines, Penn Ohio has you covered.
5 other games on Friday night. Let's get right at it and start with the big game down at Helling Stadium. Elwood City, 3-1 overall against 1-3 Western Beaver. I'll tell you what, this is a Golden Beaver team much better than what that record shows, and they're only going to get better as the year goes on. They got plenty of those skill players, and a freshman quarterback, Javen Peel. I mean, he threw for over 300 yards last week, averages 200-plus passing yards per game. And how about this? Each of the last 2 games thrown for 4 touchdowns. Dorian McGee and Dante Green each caught a pair of touchdowns last week, and if not for a botched snap on a 2-point conversion, we might be talking about 1-0 Western Beaver in terms of the MAC standings. 1-0, that's what Elwood City is. Let's talk about the Wolverines here. 4 games in a row to start the year. Quarterback Chris Smiley has both run for and thrown a touchdown. He's been real solid behind center, has a junior quarterback. 4 total touchdowns last week. Michael Walters catching a pair of those touchdowns a week ago in the conference opener win over Freedom. And Elijah Palmer McCain, he's averaging 141 rushing yards per game. Hasn't gotten in the end zone too much. Only 3 touchdowns on the year so far for EPM, but definitely the workhorse still in the backfield. And how about this? Elwood City can go 4-1 with a win on Friday night. The last time they had a 4-win season was 2015. The last time they started 4-1 was back in 2010. So that's what good old Lincoln High will try for on Friday night. Another game down south, this one in Beaver County. Beaver Falls hosting Neshannock. 1-0, both teams are in conference play. Neshannock coming off that emotional 27-26 win that we just alluded to over Western Beaver. Now another tough challenge against the defending conference champion Beaver Falls on the road. Gino Mazzocca for Neshannock. He hasn't thrown for a ton of yards, but he has spread the wealth. Now 10 different receivers on the year have caught a pass for Neshannock. He also leads the lead, does Mazzocca, in rushing touchdowns. 4 of them on the year. Rushing yards as well, he leads the team. But you saw last week, I think, the big-time development of Anthony Eakin as a runner. He finished just shy of 200 total yards from scrimmage, a touchdown rushing and receiving. Dom Cubelis, the top receiver for this Lancer team, he was a bit quiet on the offensive front. Didn't have a catch, just 3 rushing yards in a couple of attempts. I expect the Lancers to try to find more ways to get the junior wide out the ball here this week against the Tigers. They're led by Meech Taylor and Italian Beaufort. They each had pick 6s on defense for a touchdown, and Beaufort also had a pair of rushing touchdowns in last week's blowout win over New Brighton, which was a big bounce-back win after they had lost in each of their previous 2 contests, albeit against higher classification opponents in Knock and Beaver. Deshaun Anderson, he's a dual-threat quarterback. The Lancers are going to have to do their best to contain him as best as possible. In the loss to Knock, he threw for 232 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 82 yards in that game and 2 more scores, over 300 yards of total offense for the quarterback in that game. Denari Harris over 100 receiving yards in that game as well. He's one of the many targets that Anderson has to throw the football. And you saw Western Beaver put up, again, over 300 yards passing against Neshannock last week. Speaking of number 300, it would be number 300 in terms of the program wins in Neshannock football history. A big win it would be for that reason, and also because it would be 2-0 with a win on the road in the MAC Conference. We'll go from one Tigers to the other, from down south in Beaver Falls to up north in Sharon, as we flip over to Region 3 and District 10. The Sharon Tigers hosting Wilmington this week. And while Sharon's offense hasn't been great, their defense sure has been phenomenal. They allowed 17 points last week to Grove City. That's the first points they allowed all year. 14 straight quarters of shutout football to begin the season. Mr. Ham has really done a good job of controlling that Tigers offense. 7 total touchdowns on the season for the Tigers. And they're going to be out for blood, I think is the best way to put it, after suffering that first loss of the year on a walk-off field goal a week ago. Wilmington, on the other hand, a tough loss last week against Hickory, 41-21. But they did show some life in the offense. The issue, the passing game, it's not there right now. That's not necessarily an issue, though, the way that they run the football. The rushing attack that they have, Ben Miller again leading the area in rushing yards, 150 per game for him. Buddha Book now back to his more natural H-back position. Chase Mitchelltree's been a nice little find at the fullback spot. It's going to be tough sledding against Sharon's Hogs in the trenches for sure. They're allowing less than 100 rushing yards per game defensively. So can Wilmington find ways, hey, maybe a swing pass here or there, something a little bit different just to keep the Hogs up front defensively for Sharon on their toes? That's probably going to be the key to that one. Let's get back to Class 1A football in WPIL country. As Shenango hosts Rochester, another homecoming game here as the Cats take on the Rams. It is a banged-up Shenango squad. They only dressed 20 players last week against Union. Coach Graham and company, they're getting healthy again. How many will be available for this week is to be seen. They told us last week they're hoping it will be back within 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll hopefully see a couple more back in uniform this week and a couple more in the following week. Got to give a shout out to Colton Federici. Tight end last year, switched to wide receiver this year, moves to running back out of necessity last week for a few packages. I think you'll see a few more chances with him getting, get the ball into the hands of your playmakers. And that's what they were able to do last week a little bit. It was something different, and it worked at times in that kind of full house backfield with the big boy, 6'3", 220 pounds, getting the rock in the running game. The issue right now with Shenango is the turnovers. 4 turnovers against Riverside, 3 last week against Union. Really stymied any chance for the Cats to get an attack going. If Sam Myers can get time in the pocket, can find guys like Federici and Ross, they are guys who can get open downfield and on the outside. They can have some success, but it all comes down to ball control in the end. And no one says ball control better than Shenango graduate Gene Matzuk, the coach of the Rams. He'll be coming back to his alma mater with a 3-0 record, by the way, is Rochester. Antonio Laurel, the third year he's started. He's only a junior, but he's been a starter at running back since his freshman year. He anchors that backfield with Don Guido. But Rochester has shown, though, this year with Jaden Norman at quarterback, they can throw it at times. So you can't just dial in on the run every single play. Norman also had a couple big runs from the quarterback position as well. So 1-0 Rochester against 0-1 Shenango in Big 7 conference play. And finally, the Canes traveling down to Beaver County to take on Central Valley. The Warriors, again, doing what the Warriors do. We'll start with them. I mean, not going far south as the Mason-Dixon line, but that's what the Canes are going to have to deal with. Mason-Dixon is part of a trio of backs who have been fantastic this year. Leads the way. 7 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns on the year for Mason-Dixon, throwing Brandon Singleton and Jance Henry as a second and third option. And really the quarterback, Stephen Rutherford, he's been a pretty solid running back as well to go along with his 400 passing yards and a trio of touchdowns. The Central Valley team that is just, they're poised to be, again, the front runners right there with Aliquippa again in the Parkway Conference. It's now a 13-game losing streak. Newcastle, right now, you just got to go one little minor victory at a time within the game. You only had 32 total yards of offense last week, and you almost have to go maybe think back to basics. Get a first down. No penalties on this drive. No turnovers. Turnovers especially, because 8 of 10 possessions last week for West Allegheny began in Newcastle territory. 5 first-half turnovers was a big part of why that ended up happening. Tyrell Harris, Malik Jefferson, Kayvon Gardner, great playmakers. They've been able to make some plays when they get the opportunity, but they have been few and far between. Some consistency in that Newcastle offense, holding on to the football and avoiding those penalties for long yardage situations, because those 1st and 58s need to cease to exist for Newcastle to be competitive the rest of the way in what we know is going to be a brutal Parkway Conference in Class 4A. There you have it, your 7 games previewed this week on the Lawrence County SportsNet. The 7 games featuring the 8 county teams. Again, thanks to our sponsor, the Lawrence County Community Action Partnership, powering sponsors for lcsportsnet.com. And as always, our weekly get-togethers delivered by Penn Ohio Bottled Water. Remember to ask about their custom label options and get quality bottled water delivered straight to your home or work, just the same way that we deliver these news and notes as we prepare for Week 4, Game 5. And after this one, guess what? We are halfway through the 2023 regular season. Glad you can join us. Have fun wherever you are on Friday night. We're hoping you're not at a game. If you're not at a game, that you're watching us here at lcsportsnet.com, Lawrence County SportsNet, powered by